Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's lesson. Today, we're going to be looking at direct and indirect speech. Now, very simply, those of you who will think of reported speech, that's just a different word or different terminology for indirect speech. So this is everything that you do know. It's not something strange that's happening now. I'm Mrs. Swart, and I'm going to take you through today's lesson. So let's have a look at what we need to know. Direct speech appears in many different forms. Those are the actual words that people speak, and that's why you will hear someone say, and I quote, because they want you to know it's the exact words. It's a verbatim quote of what the person has said. And how do we recognize direct speech? We will see it in things like quotation marks. When we have, as the last example says, Mrs. Swart says, then we have quotation marks. Welcome to today's lesson. We also see it in dialogue form. Now, with the dialogue, you do not use quotation marks because the form of the dialogue, the name and the colon, will tell you these are people's words, the actual words that they speak. Any other instructions will be in brackets. And of course, as a speech bubble as well. The speech bubble is usually in a cartoon, and it shows you that this character is speaking. Remember this, when you do direct speech, that the first word within the quotation marks, so where you open your quotation marks, that first word is always written starting with a capital letter or uppercase. Now this you can see very clearly, Mrs. Swart said, then we have a punctuation mark, then we have a space. And your opening of your quotation marks is just before the first letter of what the person says. It, and the it, you'll see the I is a capital I. It is hot today. Then we have another punctuation mark, and then we see that the quotation marks close. Before you open or close your quotation marks, you always have a punctuation mark. You saw it in the previous example. And here are a variety of examples: said or asked, or you could have the actual words spoken by the person first, and then only Mrs. Swart said. So, and another thing is sometimes the spoken words do appear first, but sometimes if there is enough being said, then you will find that your actual instruction, your introductory verb doesn't appear at the beginning or the end. It sometimes appears in the middle of a sentence. But quickly have a look at this, and you will recognize exactly how it works. You will see we have a punctuation mark, space, and before you can use your capital letter, you open with a quotation mark, then you have a capital letter, and you say whatever the person has said, a punctuation mark. In the second example, there's a question mark because a question is being asked, and then you close your quotation marks again. So remember that this is very important if you use direct speech in any writing. If you use it in an essay, use it correctly. Otherwise, if you don't apply the rules correctly, it becomes grammatically incorrect and it's an error. Note that the introductory word, that when it is in the middle, it would be something like, and here's a lovely example for you. You had better listen, demanded the teacher, or you will lose the match. This example I have used before. Then here you see what's happened is your sentence is split in two. It's something we've already looked at before. It's something that you are aware of. Sometimes you don't use them like this because I think you might be a little bit scared or a little weary maybe to try it in your writing. Remember always that direct or indirect speech must give us the same message. So whether I am quoting someone directly or whether I am reporting on it, you think of being a witness in a court case and you heard someone say something. If I'm going to report on what they said and I use reported speech, I must still convey the same message. There are two ways of reporting: immediate or later report back. So it's present tense or past tense. Now, it's really interesting what happens here. The tense of the introductory verb will tell you whether it's immediate or later. Very simply, if a person uses says, present tense verbs, it's going to be an immediate report back. If they say something like said, asked, demanded, anything like that. Reprimanded even, it would be a later or a past tense report back. And that's going to affect how you write the sentence. So let's look here. When you do an immediate report back, your introductory verbs are verbs like says, asks, replies. It's present tense. So what happens to the words spoken by the speaker? For instance, if the speaker says, "It is hot today," and we say it's an immediate report back because the introductory verb is says, so it's present tense, then the tense used by the speaker will stay in the tense that the speaker has spoken in. So if we had something like Mrs. Swart says, "It is hot today," and you rewrite that in indirect or reported speech, you're going to say, Mrs. Swart says that it is hot today. Note that the tense doesn't change, that's used by the speaker. And of course, you know that the word that serves as a bridge to link the two parts together. So that should be pretty clear and very simple. So if it was Mrs. Swart says it was hot today, then you will say Mrs. Swart says that it was hot today. It's not going to change the actual tense that the speaker uses, whatever they're saying. But a later report back, we have an introductory verb. Again, it's in the past tense. Said, asked, replied. So what happens here? I love to use this example, and I'll put my show with my thumbs to the back because I want you to remember that the tense used by the speaker takes a step into the past. So if it's in present, it will go into past. If it's in past, it will go even further into the past. Mrs. Swart said, "It is hot today," would then become, because it's a later, it's a past tense, that means that the tense used by the speaker will go a step into the past. So if my direct quote was, "It is hot today," and I'm reporting on that, I would say Mrs. Swart said that it was hot today. If I had said it was hot today, then you have to remember this. It was hot today, but it has to go even further into the past because you're doing a past tense or a later report back. So you will then say, Mrs. Swart said that it had been hot that day. Take note as well that today changes because of we're changing certain words, we change pronouns, we change things like that to make sure, and adverbs of place and time, things like that change as well. So I can't say Mrs. Swart said that it had been hot today. It had been hot that day. Now, things that change in our reported speech are things like our punctuation. We do not use quotation marks when we do reported speech or indirect speech. The pronouns change. If it says I cannot report it as I in reported speech because then it looks as if you are reporting about yourself. Commands and exclamations change. Question words, if or whether. And remember what I've said before, use if rather than whether, because if you spell whether, that it looks as if it's a sunny weather outside there, then it is going to be incorrect. And then, of course, if the first word of a question is a question word, you use it as the connecting word. That's your who, what, when, where, why, how, those words. Your adverbs of place and time will change in the past tense. This is very important to remember so that you don't get mixed up with it and mess it up. So let's quickly look here. Here becomes there. This becomes that, now becomes then. Yesterday will be the previous day. The day before yesterday will be 2 days ago, and tomorrow will be the following day. And the day after tomorrow in 2 days' time. These are just things you need to learn, and remember you'll use them in past tense, not in present tense. Another thing is our pronouns. Very important to remember, we use grammatically correct pronouns. There are a lot of modern fungal things going on here that we are not using because we're using grammatically correct English. So if it is a girl, it is she, or a male or a man, he. If it's an animal, it. And in present, you would say I am, past, I was. He is, was. So you need to know this so that you know which ones to apply when you are doing this exercise. Now, what I have for you today, instead of taking from the different slides, what I've done today is I've given you a sentence in direct speech. And I want you to go and look very carefully to make sure that you select the correct option, because there's only one correct answer in each of them. And look very carefully. It could be something to do with, I'm going to give you a tip now. It could be something to do with, for instance, the introductory verb, because if the person has said, Mrs. Swart said, you can't say Mrs. Swart says. So those are the sorts of things to look at. Look at punctuation. You don't use question marks. You don't use quotation marks. You don't use exclamation marks because you use words. So I'm going to wish you good luck with the slideshow, with the quiz that you're going to follow with you. And please try it, because we'd really like to see how you're doing and that we can know exactly what you need help with. There you are. There's the QR code. And I hope you enjoyed the quiz today. Thank you for your time, and thank you for giving me this opportunity.